a painter's dream week of extreme painting, epic landscapes, and I cannot wait to tell you about this unforgettable week that I had. So for my 50th birthday, which was in October, Grady surprised me with a painting trip. He said, well, actually he said this, you can either have like a big party or a trip. He'd barely gotten it out of his mouth and I'm like, a trip. I'm not really much of a party kind of person. There's two places on earth that are like my favorite places, Maine and England. And we had just taken a trip to England like last summer and we're contemplating another one. And so Maine it was. We had just taken a big international trip and wasn't really up for that either. So Maine it was. I absolutely love Maine. We've been there twice. Where he picked was like over the top. He really spoiled me on this trip. Where we stayed was amazing. We stayed in this quaint, gorgeous inn in Booth Bay Harbor. It was like my eyeballs almost hurt. It was so pretty there. Before we left for the trip, I told Grady, I said, okay, since this is my birthday trip, I'm gonna try to not feel guilty for like painting like a maniac because that's all I'm gonna do. I'm gonna paint like crazy for the whole week. So we used to take like 2 or 3 ski trips a year for him. He's a big skier and this was back when I did paint, but not as much as I do now. So I would basically like hang out in the room a lot of the whole trip. So he said, do you feel guilty sometimes on trips, like spending time painting? And I said, yeah, sometimes. And he said, well, all those years that we took those ski trips and you basically sat in the room the whole week, I didn't feel guilty at all. And I was like, okay. But it did free me up. I was like, I'm just gonna paint and I'm not gonna feel guilty, which I didn't. Okay, so this little town of Booth Bay Harbor was so quaint. It was like everywhere you looked, your eyeballs were just like happy, happy, happy. It was like just even where we stayed at the top of this mountain in this inn, I felt like I don't even need to go anywhere else. Just this view right here, I could paint for the entire time. It was interesting. I only painted there once or twice, and then I found some spots down by the water that I just loved. I'm really like that. I'm very much like a kind of repetitive painter. I find a spot and then I'll go to it over and over. Even I'm like that at home too. I think it's because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time like looking around. Like I just want to get to painting. So I mentioned that there was extreme painting. It definitely was extreme painting. At some point, Grady said, so those of you that have been here for a while, you remember that epic video where I painted like out in the snowstorm. Remember I painted like this big acrylic painting, this big painting, and then I brought it inside and it all melted. Like I turned around and the whole painting had melted onto the floor.
Oh, that was so fun. Oh my gosh. Just call me extreme woman.
That was nothing compared to this trip, mainly because of the weather. We did have great weather, but it was very windy. And also we had one day where it was not only windy, it was the coldest day. It was like a mix of rain and drizzle and just well, the kind of day that you definitely don't go outside. Grady was like, this puts that video to shame. He was like, this is a real extreme painting. I was like, I know. In fact, I had a couple people come out that day when I was out at this spot where it was just all rainy, and you could tell they had walked out there just to see what I was doing. It was definitely a spot that was probably very busy usually, and because of the weather, like nobody was out except for me. So peaceful out here, isn't it?
All except for the one loud artist.
All of us. You think I should leave the water like it is, or I'm about to start working on it? This just doesn't really look like me at all, does it? Nothing about it. I'm gonna tackle it. What do you think?
Well, I don't know what that means.
I'm gonna do something different to the water.
It definitely says what the mood is out here. I mean, look at that.
Yeah, but I'm just not liking it sometimes. Splatter some paint. Oh no, are you doing the close-up, getting my face shot? Grady, stop. I'm trying to resolve a paint. lady come down here. Isn't that funny? It's like she came just to see what I was doing, and then it was one of those not say anything. She just walked in and walked. Kind of like so.
She was walking or driving?
She walked down here.
I didn't see anybody. And she didn't say a word? Not a word?
That's what they've been doing lately. But they're not going. The paintings aren't going very good. I don't feel like so. I don't blame them. So I found a couple spots that I absolutely loved and went back to those over and over. Part of the reason it felt so extreme though was because I did not take, I didn't really work in a sketchbook. I took one sketchbook that just had a few pages left, which I'll show you that later, the sketches that I did in those. But I did like this experiment. I mainly took larger canvases or canvas boards or things like that, like finished surfaces to paint on. I felt like after the Italy trip, I was like, I'm ready for that. And I wanted to play around and experiment with what travels best, how can I get a whole bunch of things there, which sizes, which surfaces do I like, all of that. So I took a range, a gamut of everything. You'll see those paintings at the end. I'm going to show you everything I painted. I painted a ton. So I took different surfaces, but I also took an easel. I took this very cheap easel. You'll see it set up in the pictures and videos, and it did work great. I did have to weight it down. Throughout the week, we kept kind of changing the setup because my easel and paints and everything blew over multiple times. And when I say blew over, I mean it was like an explosion of stuff. Like the easel and the painting flying off. The setup I had with my paints turned over multiple times. And very quickly I started worrying about having enough paint. It was interesting. I think it was the last day we found this place. It was a bookstore, but in the corner up at the top floor, they had basically a whole art store. Grady was like, you could have just gotten paint here. I was like, well, no, I didn't know about it. Let me mention this. So I took that easel, but I also just took my paint pot, my paints like this. This is the 59 milliliter 2 fluid ounces, and it was perfect. A lot of y'all have asked about what did I actually end up taking to Italy, which was basically a 2-week trip, and did I have enough? This time I knew it was only going to be a week, and this was plenty. Normally this would have been plenty. These smaller tubes, not tubes. What are these? Jars, whatever they are. Would have been plenty. And they were plenty. And most of these were not filled to the brim either. But because I lost my paints, lost them, turned upside down, covering the rocks or wherever I was. I was out there scraping the rocks trying to get the paint and stuff like that. Oh, it was a mess multiple times. I ended up having enough paint, but that was making me very nervous. And I think it was affecting my painting at some points because I was worried about losing paint, even though Grady was like, I'll drive into town and get you paint. I loved standing and working at an easel and would keep my paints on the ground too. What was nice about that is anytime you're standing up painting or even sitting down painting, but definitely standing up, you can kind of get stiff and your body really hurt because you're not moving much. It was nice being in these very open areas because I could step back a lot, which is what I do at my easel. So I'm kind of moving, but because I had all that stuff on the ground, I was constantly like this, moving, bending, and that also encouraged me to step back from my painting a lot, which was super nice. Now, the negative was, I was gonna say the negative was I had a ton of people come by and talk to me, but I don't know if it was just the easel. I was set up in multiple places that were very exposed, and I've literally never in my life had so many people come over and talk to me. Never. I don't know if it was kind of like a touristy location, so people were on vacation, so they felt a little more comfortable coming over to the stranger. Lots of people thought that I was just a local. I'm not real sure why, but I think every time that my easel blew away, it was when I was talking with somebody instead of being there. Sometimes you can feel a big gust coming and I would brace and hold, or I was just holding the easel and painting. So I definitely have to figure that out, the whole anchor things down. And the people coming by didn't bother me. It did get a little bit much because I really just wanted to get in the zone. Usually I don't mind people stopping by because it's usually just 1 or 2 people max. Usually people don't bother me at all, but this was just kind of a constant stream. And I also had this constant, one time I was and behind me there was this big bridge that was like the thoroughfare for everybody. You could hear people being like, oh, there's an artist. And a couple times I was in this place where there was this big restaurant with all these windows just overlooking me, and I thought, you could tell, like I'd look up there one time or a couple times, you could tell everybody was just watching the whole painting process. It was really nice. I was in a place mentally where I was just really confident, really comfortable. I was also in like my element with water and boats and quaint, cute little houses and all that. One time I was walking, I had finished painting. I was in front of that restaurant. I could tell they wanted to see, so I held it up and people were like clapping. Normally I wouldn't do that, but it was like, hey, I know that if I was standing there watching you paint the whole time, I would want to see what you painted. So I held it up, and it was really cute how people were clapping. We also ate food like nobody's business. I mean, like good food. I'm not even a foodie. Grady's very much a foodie. He could talk food nonstop. He pretty much does talk about food nonstop. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I cannot talk about whatever he's talking about with food much longer. And then if he gets talking with somebody else that's a foodie, I'm just like, somebody shoot me now. But the food at this place in this area was so good. And where we stayed at this inn, they had the most extreme breakfast every morning. It was like gourmet of gourmet, like things I've never eaten, the way they were putting together breakfasts. It was so, like, I even looked forward to it every morning. We'd be walking over and I'd be like, oh, what are we gonna eat? Or I wish we were gonna have that like shrimp and grits with blah, blah, blah. I don't know, it was just something. It was absolutely something. And the views that we had where we were for breakfast was just, whew. So the best part of the breakfast though, they had these whipped butters. They had like this station. I didn't even get a good picture of it with all the stuff that they had, but they would have like homemade breads and muffins, and it's kind of like the bread station, jams and all homemade jams and all this, but they had these butters, these whipped butters. Now you're seeing a picture of it like the last day. That butter was twice as high when we first got there. I put a dent in those butters. I mean, I was literally taking like cups of them, like big spoonfuls that I put in like a to-go cup to go home with me, because for some of the lunches we just ate in the room. We'd come back and eat and then like crash for a little bit, then I'd get back out painting. And I bought some bread and like apples, and I would just put that butter on so thick. There were a couple bites that I was like, wow, even for me that was too much butter, because I love butter. But it was like whipped butters, like one was like a sea salt, one was like cinnamon honey. I don't know, they were just whew, something. So we ate great. It truly was just such a memorable trip. I keep thinking about it and think, oh, I wish we could like time warp ourselves back there. It just was wonderful to be able to like fully zone out from work and home and just paint. I will say this, it was hard from this standpoint. It was super bright. Anytime you're a place where there's like water surrounding where you are and it's sunny days, the brightness is just overwhelming. Like my eyes just almost hurt sometimes. There were days that it was cloudy and I just felt like this relief, like, whew, my eyeballs can have a rest. That is all for another topic. Let me show you what I painted on the trip and the paintings that are available. They are up on my website and are available except for one that I'm keeping for myself at this point, which you'll see that because I want it for kind of my birthday present and memories of just such an amazing trip. Okay, let's jump into the work that I actually did. I want to show you the paintings that I did in Maine. I think these all are from Maine. Yes, I'm working on a larger one right now that I've been doing back in the studio, but I'm not quite done with it. I did something the other night that I'm like, don't know if I like, so I'll show that one to you. It's this one. I want to work on this boat right here some more. Hopefully, I actually meant to do it before I started filming this, but I've started, so let me show you the paintings that I did while in Maine. Most of them, as I already said, were done on like some kind of finished surface, canvas board, that kind of thing. And then I have a handful of ones on paper. So let me show you. So I think this is the first one that I did while I was there. No, it's the first one I did on a surface. Actually, it could have been the first one I did. I don't know. I know it was early. I thought that I would not want to venture anywhere else to paint. I thought, this is my scene. There's so much to paint here. I did this and then one in my sketchbook. There are two that I did there that are very atmospheric. The first one and the last one, I think it's the last one in this batch that I'll show you. I like atmospheric paintings, but I am not that kind of painter. I don't enjoy necessarily painting that way. I do love this view, and it captures how these really cool buildings, like really neat Cape Cod style houses, just kind of came up and framed the sea there with the boats. Let's see, how do I want to do this? I'll put these here. Okay, this is one that I really, okay, I barely got started and my battery died, so. This is one that I really love this view. I did this view multiple times. I loved this really long red building. It almost looked kind of schoolhouse, like an old schoolhouse, but it plunged down. It's like on this island, and it had this dock. And then I love the boats, and captured like the little church, really old church that was in the background that I loved. This was done, I think, quite quickly, and I love the energy. This was one of my favorite places. Absolutely loved setting up at this place. It was at this restaurant that we found that was so good. We went to it twice. We had the best mussels. So good. And we went there one night for dinner, and I saw this view, and I thought, I definitely want to come paint here. It was right next to where they were like cleaning fish, bringing fish in, cleaning them. This guy was like cleaning this boat, like the underside of it, so it was kind of nice. We came to this place for dinner. I scoped it out, and I sat here one day and did this painting and this painting. And obviously you could tell I like changed around the boat. I think this boat maybe was even like the shape of the one that the guy was like cleaning. I think it was a different color because I wanted a little bit of that red to balance. But I loved the colors in the background, again, of the trees. There was this kind of warm glow, very fall, and these were super fun to paint. It was nice because I was sitting down instead of having my easel, so I think I felt a little bit more relaxed. I also had like cars behind me because I was in this really small parking lot, but I just wasn't as exposed. I was painting from my lap, and after so many days of painting my easel and standing and being more exposed, it just felt kind of like being back in my studio, like this little safe place that I could really just get into the zone, and had fond memories of being there and painting these. Okay, this is of this same place. You can tell I've zoomed in, and this was a little hut. I stood on this dock a couple times to paint. Another scene that I'll show you in a minute. I just loved the composition of this. I loved this boat. Usually the boats that I painted were not right there. I would find a boat in the distance that I liked the color or shape and put it where I wanted it. And then I've got the little village back here. This day though, I painted out in the like drizzle, misty, wet. It started raining on me at some point. It was probably the coldest day, and we just went out and did it. Grady found this great spot. It was out on this big dock. It was quite wet that day. Maybe that's why this is so moody. I don't know. This was a very hard one to photograph also. That's another thing. Like moody paintings are very hard to photograph. I don't know why, but this one definitely was. I almost painted over this, but I just decided to leave it. And it does capture like the almost dreary or moody atmospheric day. Okay, let's move on to the larger works. Oh, I just thought I've got another painting I've got to go grab. I knew I had another smaller one. This was painted on some wood canvas board that we've prepared, cut and prepared, and I forgot how much I loved painting on wood. It's a really great surface. It's nice and hard and firm, and there's a smoothness. So if you like painting on paper, you probably would like painting on board. In fact, I'm probably gonna have Grady cut some more for me. The reason I didn't have this in here with this, I had this in my den. This is one of my favorites, not just because of the painting, but it does capture a scene that I loved. I painted here at least 3 times, maybe more than that. Some of the times that I wanted to paint here, I couldn't because of the lighting. Like the sun was here and just blaring. But there's something about this. It's smaller than these, and I captured just enough of the detail. I remember after painting on canvas several times, when I finally got to this one, it's like I could sigh a little bit of relief because I was able to get to all the things that I wanted to get to. I found with the bigger paintings, I think because I'm a slow painter that I just wasn't getting to some of the details that I wanted to. I still love these paintings. I just love this painting, and I feel like it captures where I painted a whole lot, and it also is capturing the way I want to paint. So I told Grady I may keep this one. I've got it set up in our den for me to see if I get over it or not, because sometimes I'll look at a painting for a few days and just be like, okay, I can't look at that painting anymore, I'm done. I don't know why I'm like that, but I thought, well, let me see if I get bored with this one. It may not be for sale now, but if you love it, keep an eye on it, because at some point it could come up for sale, because I do that sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm over that, and then I'll go and mark it for sale. So keep that in mind. Okay, on to the bigger size. All these are, what size are these? Maybe 16 by 20. This is obviously of that same scene. I did get quite a bit here, in here, and there is so much texture in this picture. This back here were all the houses and docks and like flags and little bits of color was so fun to paint. I loved doing the trees, and this was done in the morning, and you can just see that morning light. And this green restaurant, which was called the Chowder House, which I love doing the sign. I think it was the sign in this green building that made me want to set up where I did. And then I ended up just loving all of this back here too. But it had this great weather vane on top with this horse, and that was just so fun to paint. And also I find that I really love windows and, you know, capturing like the little curtains and things like that. Just a really fun one to look at. I love it. Very happy with that. This is, remember I said that I stood on this dock several times, and you also saw footage of me out painting, I think, one or two of these. This view was great. I moved things around a little bit. I think this was actually closer in. But again, I love like the abstractness I get to do in the background is a lot of fun. This board, this was a masonite board that I bought. I think you can get masonite and cut it yourself, which I may get Grady to cut something for me because I loved this surface. It was really wonderful surface to paint on, just like buttery smooth. It was interesting. I think it was when I was painting this one. I've got a couple, do I have a couple versions? Yes, it was this painting. I was painting this painting and this lady came over. I mean, literally every time I was out painting, people came over every time. I was painting this and I had this boat in, and she said, "Oh, are you not gonna get that great boat in?" I can't even remember if I said, "Well, here it is," because I make things the way I want to make it. So I was probably change the colors or taking things from another boat, but I think I just kept painting and didn't even answer. At that point, I think I was just kind of like, I can't chat to everybody that comes. I'm a working artist. Anyways, this house was really fun. I think it was, yeah, this one, I did paint it a little bit more like it. It had this kind of blue shutters maybe. And then this one, I changed it up because I loved this kind of just muted. This just felt a little more moody and muted. I didn't want that pop of color there. So I think this has more of that like moody, misty feel about it. Again, a lot of texture. These houses could not be more fun. When I look at those, I'm like, oh yeah, that was so fun to paint. Okay, that's it from right here. Hopefully I'll finish that other one, the big one, because I love how it's going. I'm at that part of painting where I get kind of frustrated and over it and bored, and having to finish a painting for me is the worst part. So I've got to like make myself. So maybe I'll do that and hopefully show it to you someplace, maybe at the end. So we'll see. As far as sketchbooks, I only took one sketchbook. I did take my watercolor gouache palette that I transformed, kind of did surgery on. I think I've got a reel, no, it's not called a reel, what is it? A short here on YouTube, and then I also did a post on Instagram about my palette, my gouache and watercolor palette that I combined. And I took a handful of color pencils, and that was basically it as far as like sketching supplies. I took my ETCHR sketchbook, which I love, and I've pretty much finished it with the Maine trip. I will show you what I did. Let's see, a lot of the sketchbook you can see in either, I think, preparing for the Italy trip, and then also on the Italy trip. There are a few sketches in here I haven't shown in that, but for the most part, I've shown other parts of this sketchbook in different places. This was a painting I did with my watercolor gouache, and it looks like maybe a little bit of color pencils. I think it was preparing for the trip. It may have been when we were at the hospital with a family member for quite a while, and we were spending long days and nights there. So I think I did this one, pulled up a picture from the computer. It's always hard for me to paint from photographs though. I hate painting from photographs. What I did here compared to what I did later is just so different. And also I ended up giving up on this because it's just not enjoyable for me to work from photographs. Let's see. Then this was done at the airport and on the airplane on the way to Maine. So I pulled up pictures of birds, and these are probably people in the coffee shop. And then some sign that I saw like down the way at the airport. I do love how this turned out. I normally wouldn't combine all these weird things, but that turned out good. This was from a sketch when I was in the hospital. I wasn't in the hospital. I was there with somebody that was in the hospital. And then this was from the first day there, the first full day. And I just sat someplace and did this. I think I needed to kind of start getting used to the scene. The lighting was so different there. It was so bright. It was just crazy town bright. And then it was also very windy. So, you know, as the week went on, I was having to figure things out. I didn't love this then, but I do love it now. I remember loving the trees and stuff in the background, like the dead ones or the white ones. This I did there at the inn that we stayed at, which was on top of this huge mountain hill thing and overlooked just the most amazing scene. And I did this with just this palette, which was so handy. I love it pared down like this. Yeah, I think I did this one morning, maybe before breakfast, and we were having some coffee. It was really crisp and cool out. It was just a wonderful morning. This I also did at breakfast. We would go to our little inn, like breakfast area early and get a nice table. It had amazing views, so I did this. Looks like maybe just with colored pencils. And then the food came out and I stopped. It was time to eat. But I like it just like this. And then, is this the last one? Yes, this is one that I did from photos. I may have done this at the airport. I can't remember. I know we walked around and I took photos of all the different areas, like signage and buildings and boats that I liked. And then I made this. Like, these buildings weren't next to each other. And this weather vane was on top of a different building and this boat wasn't there. So I just kind of built this scene with using the watercolor gouache and color pencils. And then this is the last page. I think this is basically a throwaway page because this is like where the little pocket is, but I'm going to paint something on this and then this sketchbook will be done. If you would like to learn more about the way I approach and paint landscapes, I have 2 online classes. I hold nothing back in my online classes. Like, you get all the scoop. I have 2 classes, Taking Notes in the Landscape and Memories of the Landscape. Both great classes. Both, you get completely different things in them. I have other online classes too, but those are both landscape classes. That is it for this week. I will see you back here in 2 weeks. See you then.